what we often do see also when it comes to crime, there are no arrests and no charges brought at all. It's certainly the case in the case of hate crimes. The police in England and Wales have been told they must tackle significant problems in handling hate crime ahead of a possible rise in such offences after we do actually leave the EU. That's according to the watchdog, Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary. They found inadequate responses in 89 of the 180 cases it reviewed. They say it often took an average of 5 days for police to visit victims, and many were not seen by police at all. It also said that hate crime had risen after the 2016 referendum result, and the same could happen after we leave the EU in 2019. Well, we're joined now by Wendy Williams. She's an inspector of Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services, and joins us now. Good morning to you, Wendy.
Good morning.
Good morning. What are these significant problems, and why are they coming about in terms of how police tackle hate crime?
Yes, well, to place matters in context, we did actually see quite a lot of good practice, but we did also find that there was an inconsistent and patchy picture across the country, which meant that cases weren't being flagged when they should have been flagged, which is important to make sure that victims then receive a priority service. And that means that they're referred to the right support services, that they get the right response. And unfortunately, that first contact, which is that golden opportunity that the police have to get it right, wasn't always being optimised.
I mean, we've got a lot of people who complain, you know, that they call the police. They've got, with stories in the papers this week, they've got a suspect who's stolen their mobile phone, or a burglary that's taken place. They know the identity of the victim. They can't get the police to turn up there. Is it a massive concern that police are not turning up to reports of hate crime, given that we know a lot of these reports of hate crime often don't have evidence? They may have been reported by a witness rather than by a victim, and often are a subjective point of view rather than an objective fact. Isn't this actually the police prioritising crimes which most people would regard as more serious?
Well, the good thing was that police chiefs themselves recognised that hate crime was a priority and should be treated as such. And so all that we identified were actions that the police should take to make good on that commitment, which included affording it a priority, sending officers out in a timely way to find out what the strength of the evidence is. Because if it is that the evidence is strong and cases can be built, then that in turn can not only support victims, but also ultimately, hopefully, prevent these crimes occurring in the future.
But one of the big issues with hate crime is this definition of hate crime, which the one that's accepted by the Crown Prosecution Service and others, that it is entirely subjective. And it doesn't require any evidence whatsoever. And it can be somebody who has just either been one part of an unpleasant encounter with another person, or has just simply witnessed an unpleasant encounter between two other people. You can anonymously report. A lot of these hate crimes that have been reported are anonymous reports, and there can actually be no evidence put forward, and yet that still counts as a crime statistic. I think a lot of people, when they realise that, would say, well, this shouldn't be a priority for the police.
It's not. It is correct that hate crime, the definition of it, is based on the perception of the individual. And if it is that they think they've been targeted as a result of prejudice on the basis of, or hostility on the basis of a protected characteristic. However, it doesn't end there. For cases to come to court and for cases to be successfully prosecuted, there has to be evidence. And so we are simply calling for the police to, conform to the priorities that they set themselves. So they say, this is a priority, it's something that we want to work on. And we're saying, well, if that's the case, then why not comply with the assessments that you say are important, getting out quickly, speaking to victims and getting the maximum evidence to hopefully build strong cases.
But that's the whole point, is often there won't be evidence. I mean, they don't go out to a lot of burglaries where there is clear evidence. And look, this is on the Crown Prosecution Service's CPS's own website. So when is it a hate crime? They say there is no specific offence of hate crime, but many different offences, from assault to online threats. If the offence is perceived by a victim or witness, so it doesn't even have to be the victim, to have been motivated by hostility towards the victim's disability, race, religion, sexual orientation or transgender identity, it can be recorded as a hate crime. It then goes on, there is no legal definition of hostility. So police and the CPS use the everyday understanding of the word, which includes ill will, spite, contempt, prejudice, unfriendliness, antagonism, resentment and dislike. So someone perceiving that someone else was unfriendly to someone, perhaps because of their religion, their ethnicity, their sexuality, that is a hate crime. I think when most people hear that definition, I've not made that up. I've just been reading that out from the Crown Prosecution Service's own website. They will not be surprised that the police, while they're paying lip service to making this a priority, are not actually, in terms of their day-to-day policing, prioritising dealing with reports of hate crime.
If you look at our report points to some really serious assaults that have occurred to victims who've been
then that's an
victimised.
assault, and that should be investigated. Someone being unfriendly to someone shouldn't be investigated by the police, should it?
And it's by speaking to the individual, finding out what they think the motivation was, finding out what the circumstances were, that will enable officers to prioritise those cases that are really serious and that call for a priority response, and those that are less serious and don't. And all that we're calling for is for officers to do just that. They accept that in the round, hate crime is a priority. It's a serious crime. It goes to the heart of who you are as an individual.
Well, no, Wendy. No, I'm sorry. Someone assaulting somebody is a serious crime. Someone shouting racial or religiously motivated abuse at someone is a serious crime.
Absolutely.
Someone being unfriendly to or showing dislike of someone is not a serious crime in the eye. It is a crime, it would appear, in the eyes of the CPS and the police. I don't think it's what most people regard as a crime.
Well, it depends on the nature of the allegation, as you've quite rightly pointed out. And the examples that we have given are not trivial examples. They are serious examples where individuals didn't receive the service that they had.
But again, where there's a serious examples where it's an assault and there's actual physical contact, then of course, I mean, absolutely, everyone would agree on that. In this report, it also states that there's an expectation. Well, first of all, that there was a spike in hate crime after the 2016 referendum, and also the same could happen again after we leave the EU in 2019. The claim that the hate crime rose after the 2016 referendum has largely been debunked, hasn't it? Because basically there were calls for people to report hate crime. Again, these subjective cases. A lot of the cases that were in the papers and very highly publicised turned out, when they went to court, not to have been hate crimes at all. One particular instance of a Turkish restaurant owner being involved in an attack. There is no evidence that there is more hate crime, actual objective evidence there is more hate crime in this country now or after the referendum, or likely to be after we leave in 2019.
We've simply reported on the crime survey for England and Wales and on the returns that forces have completed themselves. And they demonstrate that there has been a rise in reports of hate crime.
And those reports can be subjective.
As to the nature of those reports, it would be for others to break them down and to identify what the seriousness was. We were simply reporting on what is accepted as the evidence from the crime survey. We make no comments one way or the other, save to identify what the reports are showing.